What's up and welcome to the video. This is the OnePlus 12, the latest flagship phone from OnePlus with a really competitive price tag starting at $799. Now normally whenever you hear flagship phone and competitive price tag in the same sentence, you're probably wondering what's missing. And that's what this video is all about. So let's get into the details of the OnePlus 12. Now, I don't want you to feel like just because you asked the question, what's missing, that's necessarily a negative thing, right? We're just in the day and age of flagship phones costing $1,000 plus. Like the S24 Ultra here on the table is like $1,200. So whenever you have a flagship phone come out that costs $800, it's pretty natural for you to be a little skeptical. And what we've seen in the past is typically companies like OnePlus, they might make some sacrifices in some key areas in order to reach a price point like this. But I will say that year over year, whenever things like this happen, the difference between a phone like this and a phone like the S24 Ultra, that gap typically gets smaller and smaller, even if sacrifices are made. And there still is a lot to like about the OnePlus 12. Even whenever it comes to something relatively simple like the build quality and how the phone feels whenever you hold it, OnePlus did a fantastic job. And they're sticking pretty true to what they've been designing for the past couple of years. So glass on the front and back with the aluminum enclosure that does a really nice job of kind of flowing and blending into the back of the phone where that camera bump actually is. And I'm a pretty simple person. For whatever reason, the OnePlus 12, it feels heavier to me than other phones I've been using, probably because the S24 Ultra and the 15 Pro Max are made out of titanium. So whenever I hold a phone like this, that's very heavy, especially where the camera bump is at, I just immediately associate it with somewhat of a more premium smartphone. Like especially if you're only spending $800 and you get a phone that feels this nice in the hand. The back is also textured depending on which color you get. I think the black looks fantastic, but the emerald also looks really cool. Kind of has this like marble looking feel to the back of it. It looks super, super dope. And the back and the front display, they actually do a really, really nice job of curving into the enclosure. So it leads to a phone that feels really, really nice in the hand. And a couple of other mentions, IP65 water and dust resistance, and wireless charging is back on the OnePlus 12. That was not present on the 11, so build is pretty great. Speaking of the display, the OnePlus 12 has one of the nicest displays I've seen so far this year. 6.82 inches, so it's very large, but it has almost everything you could possibly ask for. So Quad HD resolution, 120 hertz refresh rate, and of course, like out of the box, you're not going to see those settings right away. You're going to have to go in and change them. Like I believe, if I remember correctly, out of the box, display resolution set to 1080p, refresh rate set to like smart mode. But again, like you really can't tell because the display itself is fantastic. And as far as brightness goes, OnePlus did a stellar job whenever it comes to brightness settings. So peak max brightness of 4,500 nits, which is kind of absurd for a smartphone, but they also did a really good job on the other end of the spectrum. So whenever you want to go ultra dim, the display still looks really, really good too. There are some smartphones that struggle whenever you go really dim with the display. The OnePlus 12 is not one of them. And of course, other things I would be remiss to mention, there is an IR blaster on the top of the phone, which is absolutely, I want to say, an underrated feature for a lot of people out there. The alert slider is back, and of course there is an in-display fingerprint sensor. It is still optical. It performs well, but interesting to me that OnePlus is still sticking optical as opposed to maybe upgrading and going ultrasonic like we see on other flagship phones, but at least it still works well enough. And all of this is paired to definitely flagship level internals. So we're looking at the Snapdragon 8 Gen 3, a 5,400 milliamp hour battery, and depending on which RAM and storage option you go with, you'll have varying levels, but they're still both really good. So on the entry level, it's 12 gigs of RAM, 256 gigs of storage. And for $100 more, we'll talk about pricing later, but for $100 more, you can get bumped up to 16 gigs of RAM and 512. So regardless of which you go with, I think both are really solid for a flagship level smartphone. And all of it is paired to OnePlus's Oxygen OS 14, which is based on Android 14. And it's definitely not, I've said this in other reviews before too, it's definitely not the Oxygen OS of old, but it's still really, really good. And it's great to see that it's coming with Android 14 out of the box. I think OnePlus has done a really, really good job of ensuring that performance on their smartphones is really fast and really fluid. Like whenever you're dealing with the latest Snapdragon processor and you're also dealing with optimized software, there's nothing that I've done on the OnePlus 12 that I've even seen something as like a reduced frame rate. Like it's very, very fast. It's very, very fluid, regardless of what you're doing, which is great. And the best part about it is when it's paired to a battery that size, this smartphone is also fantastic whenever it comes to battery life. Like I haven't charged this phone in like a day and a half now. It's almost been like 30 something hours since I've had it off charge. It's almost been at 3 hours of screen on time, and it was sitting at like 78% battery life. And even if you do manage to drain the battery, you have so many different fast charging options. OnePlus gives you an 80-watt wire charger in the box that can top it up in just a little over a half hour. And if you have a AirVook wireless charger from OnePlus, it can support 50-watt wireless charging speeds that can top it up in like 45 minutes. A half hour is like me getting ready for work in the morning, and having the flexibility of having that charger in the box, which is so different from what other companies are doing these days. I think OnePlus definitely deserves a lot of credit for going against the grain and still giving you the fastest charging option in the box with their smartphones. That's definitely underrated too. All right, and now we get to what has historically almost always been the Achilles heel for OnePlus flagship phones, and that's the camera system. Now, this is actually a really solid camera setup. So let's go through the specs. We have a 50 megapixel wide angle, we have a 48 megapixel ultra wide angle, and we have a 64 megapixel periscope telephoto lens with 3 times optical zoom, which is actually more optical zoom than we had on last year's OnePlus 11. And the photos are good. I don't know if I would necessarily say that they're great. If you have really optimal lighting conditions, this phone is capable of producing some really good shots that have really great color, especially whenever you have the Pro XDR mode enabled by default. It does a great job of like enhancing the colors and visuals for each photo that you take. Detail is definitely there, and there's even like a built-in macro mode if you want to get really up close with some of your subjects. Does it stack up to other flagship Android phones like the S24 Ultra or the Pixel 8 Pro, phones that it's, I don't want to say competing against because it is significantly cheaper, but phones that it's trying to stack itself up against given the marketing and how the company positions the phone? It doesn't necessarily stack up. But I still think this is a perfectly acceptable camera system for the vast majority of people out there. If you're the type of individual where you absolutely must have the best of the best smartphone camera experience, especially if you're buying an Android smartphone, the OnePlus 12 might not be for you. But even someone like myself, I found these photos perfectly great and perfectly usable for my day-to-day use. And that's why I say I feel like it's going to be perfectly acceptable for a lot of other people. So I don't want to say that the camera system is the Achilles heel on the OnePlus 12. It's definitely getting more improved year over year. And this is really, really good. It's just not at the top flagship level. So the camera system is probably where OnePlus edged off the most in order to save some cost. Needless to say though, I really like the OnePlus 12. I think it's a great phone, and it's just one of those, it's a device that is excellent, but at the same time it's no frills. Like everything that it does, it executes really, really well, but it's not going to come with, the latest and greatest. Actually, I haven't found any artificial intelligence features on here, which it seems like that's been some of the biggest selling points for phones like the S24 Ultra, or things like enhancing the Magic Editor for the Pixel 8 Pro. You're not going to see a lot of those types of things with the OnePlus 12. It's just a phone that does a lot of great things. Fantastic display, fantastic performance, great software, fantastic battery life, and an overall good to great camera setup as well. It nails what you're looking for in a flagship smartphone experience. No frills, and a $799 price tag. And for $100 more, you can upgrade to go from 12 gigs of RAM to 16 and 256 gigs of storage to 512, which I think is a pretty decent, trade-off for the extra money. And on top of that, we haven't even got to potential to find this phone on sale at other retailers, or the fact that OnePlus will give you $100 to trade in like any phone in any condition. And obviously, if you have a different phone to trade in that's in better condition, you can even save more on something like the OnePlus 12. So I like it a lot. It's really going to come down to what you're ultimately looking for and what you value the most in your flagship smartphone experience. But if something like the camera setup is not at your top tier, something that's a little bit more of a, I'll go with jack of all trades, the OnePlus 12 is a fantastic option, and you're going to save yourself a few $100s in the process as well. So hopefully you enjoyed the review. If you did, consider hitting the subscribe button down below. If you're new, let me know what you think in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.